Hey everybody, I'm Jack Reedy with Future Pastimes, and we are reading Dune, and we are on to the banquet scene. Now, this is a favorite chapter of mine, more so in my subsequent readings of Dune than in the first time through. Although I will say that the first time I did read this, and this was back in the 80s, it fed into my feelings of optimism and hope for House Atreides, not having any idea of what unfolds. But despite the fact that there is a traitor, and they don't know who it is, and they're not even sure that there is a traitor. They're being very careful, and in this banquet, they're really sorting out who their allies might be, who are people that they can trust, who are people that they can bribe. Can they make an alliance with the smugglers to get them out of there in case things go south? So there was a lot of interesting political intrigue in this banquet scene, and the Atreides are very perceptive, especially Jessica and Paul with the Bene Gesserit training. They're able to ferret out people. Jessica is able to realize that the guild banker is in league with the Harkonnen. They can figure out that Kynes has warmed up to the Atreides a lot more. He was very cold and standoffish before the Thopter harvester incident earlier, but now he's almost signaling to the other members of the community that he likes the Atreides. But they already seem to know that he has been instructed, presumably by the Emperor himself, to not be helpful, to not be in alliance with the Atreides, but he also commands a lot of respect among those peers, and in many ways they take their cues from him, and they fear him as well. At one point, somebody says something to Kynes, and he says, "Are you challenging me?" And the clear indication is that if he is, there's going to be a knife fight right there, and the guy's like, no, I'm not challenging you. If I offended you, I apologize. That was not my intent. And Kynes is like, okay. He plays it off. He plays it cool. But just the fact that could happen, I thought was really interesting. That this just a society. At another point, Paul says something that offends Susu Suk, and there are hand signals to the guards and to the other members of House Atreides, like prepare for violence, and Paul is like, surely not, in his mind, and the guy is like, no, I apologize again. So it was just a really interesting that this sort of thing happens. It was a very charged dinner. It starts off with the Duke. Before he's gone into the banquet hall itself. He sees the basins of water, and he knows about this tradition that guests are supposed to, wash their hands or just dip their hands in there and splash a lot of the water, and then use the towels and drop them on the floor, and that the towels are going to soak up the water, and the squeezings of the towels will be sold to the poor of Arrakeen. And he knows about that, and he's reads between the lines on some of the other stuff. And he's like, this tradition ends now. And he tells the old Fremen woman that is presumably going to be the one selling the squeezings, that anybody who comes to the door during a banquet and wants a cup of water gets it. And I'm going to post a guard to make sure that my orders are carried out. And so he's gone through that whole thing. And then he finds he's very preoccupied with thoughts of his own mortality. Keeps thinking about things that lead down that path, and he's like, these are death thoughts. He sees Paul and he's proud of him, and he's like, oh, he'll make a good Duke, and he realizes that's also a thought about my own mortality. And so he's trying to snap out of it, but he's kind of in a mood, and part of it is because he knows he's got to continue this charade of pretending to suspect Lady Jessica without letting her in on it. And she's clearly bothered by his distance and coldness, and so she's not happy about the situation. And in addition, he's called Duncan Idaho back from the Fremen to be at the banquet, ostensibly to help protect Lady Jessica, but he's there to spy on her. And she doesn't realize that is why he's there either, but there's a lot of tension there. And the Duke was not crazy about having a banquet so soon, but Lady Jessica's like, no, we need to do this. We need to sort out who's who. We need to stake our claim here, and that there's a new house in there. And so this change of the tradition, he announces that, and some of their water sellers amongst the guests, and so they're feeling out the Duke, like, what other things are you going to be changing? And so there's a lot of navigation that they have to do at this banquet. And Paul and Jessica are using their Bene Gesserit training to really read the people. In fact, at one point, Lady Jessica is thinking about an counter-espionage class that she took at the Bene Gesserit school, which I found very interesting reading that, just that there was such a thing. There's no pottery and painting and creative writing. It's espionage. And so that really does get to the heart of what the Bene Gesserit are doing. And a lot of the Imperium doesn't really know or suspect, or they may suspect, but just that it's so casual in her thought process. So I really like what goes on in this scene. They realize that even some of the female guests of the VIPs who are pretending to be flighty are actually well-trained at their own levels of espionage, and so that Lady Jessica and Paul both pick up on that sort of thing as well. So yeah, there's a lot in here, and so this was not adapted in the Lynch movie, and it may have been filmed for the Villeneuve movie. There's stills that indicate that was probably the banquet, although to what extent is not clear, but certainly it was cut. It was part of the miniseries, and they actually did a pretty decent job of it, even though there are quite a few differences between what happens in the book and what happens in the miniseries. And in fact, Princess Irulan is a guest at the banquet in the miniseries, which is not the case here in the book. But it was a good way to elevate her role and bring her to the forefront rather than waiting till the very end. I liked that they had Esmar Tuick was a guest at there. He's the smuggler. The Duke understands the importance of having an ally with the smugglers because they may need their help escaping. But Lady Jessica's like, he's an important person, and we need to have to indicate that we've have our own connections as well. So there's a lot of subtext to what goes on in this banquet scene. I think the big reason that I missed it in the Villeneuve movie is because I feel like they really rushed. Atreides gets to Arrakis, but then it seems like it's 2 days later before you have the big invasion. So I think that this would have helped to slow things down a little bit, because you really do get a sense of them trying to make a go of it here on Arrakis, establishing their ties in Arrakeen and beyond, and developing those relationships, which does happen in the book. So I would say that a lot of other big fans of Dune missed seeing this scene in the movie, especially as there were stills that were released that were like, oh, it looks like there's going to be a banquet scene, which is great. And then so that's why the disappointment is a little bit more sharp for a lot of us longtime Dune fans. But yeah, this is a good scene. In some ways, I can understand why it's not cut, or why it was not included, why it was cut, because a lot of these characters most of them are not integral to what goes on. And we will see how that plays out when Part 2 is released in theaters, and get a sense of were any of these other characters, because some of them do show up later in the book, but not very many. So it's a great chapter for readers of the book, but people who are mostly just enjoying the movie, they probably don't know what they're missing. So let me know your thoughts if you have read through this before, how this plays out for you, what you think of this scene, what do you like about it, do you agree that it wasn't really necessary for the adaptation, and any questions you may have or other thoughts on there, share those. That's it for this one. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.